Hello, my name is Esa Valdez for the Alchemist Kitchen. The Alchemist Kitchen is dedicated to connecting you with the power of plants. We work with the finest herbalists who are producing high quality botanical medicines, herbal remedies, and whole plant beauty products. We celebrate artisanship, sustainability, and conscious living. We look to support the global need to increase plant diversity and the sharing of ancient wisdom from indigenous cultures. And we're here today with Linda Shanahan of Barefoot Botanicals. She is a nurse, an herbalist, and a farmer, and converted an 18-acre vegetable farm into a certified organic herb farm. So great to have you here, Linda.
Thanks for having me, Eza. I'm so excited.
So first things first, I love this quote on your website. When we love something, we will stand to protect it. This is how Earth Defenders are born. So tell us your journey. How did you start to, become aware of plants and start learning about them?
Yeah, so that quote comes from something I wrote some years ago in a blog, and it really does represent how I kind of became who I am now. And that was, I was a young new graduate from college. I moved to the West Coast. I was living in a place that was very different from where I grew up and also where I had just moved from. I moved from Philadelphia. I went to Temple, which is a very urban university. And then I moved to Southern Oregon, which is very rural and very homogenous in terms of the people that were there. It was fairly a lot of ex-urbanites from the Bay Area. And it was a totally different ecosystem. So I felt lost when I first arrived, very, very lost. And I was really missing my East Coast grittiness and diversity. And I found a home in the woods, and I really wanted to get to know the plants that were there. I initially took a basket weaving class. That was my first introduction to working with plants with my hands. And I fell in love with using plants to make things. That was kind of a really simple attraction that I had. And then I also loved to start to learn the different names of the plants that were around me. Of course, they're names given by humans, but it was a way for me to connect with the plants that were around me. And I started to really pay attention to seasonality, to when things were blooming. I started to notice barks and leaves and things that were once just a part of a sea of green to seeing individuals that were calling to me. So I wanted to learn more, and I ended up reaching out to an herbalist that was in Eugene, Oregon, farther north from me. And I ended up meeting with him. Howie Brownstein's his name. I studied with him and Stephen Yeager for a few years, actually. And he and Stephen really introduced me to deep connection to wild plants, wild places, learning how to steward those places as defenders of them and caretakers in some ways, because as an herbalist, you can be interacting with these places, harvesting from some of these places, and in that action can also be helping encourage healing of those places. So that was how my initiation began. And that was over 20 years ago. And now I have just kind of put one foot in front of the other. And always I know that I'm on the right path when it eventually keeps me aligned with plants, basically.
That's beautiful. And you just gave us a picture of an image of you just going into the forest. I think that's lovely. And you moved back to Philly in 2004.
Yes, so I moved back in part because I really felt as though I was missing the upbringing of my nieces and nephews that I knew were soon to be born. And my parents were getting older. My husband, Eric, who farms with me, he is from Michigan originally. I met him in Eugene after I'd moved there. And he and I both felt that we should be closer, at least within a driving distance of our families. And so we did grieve the loss of the West Coast, and that's where I learned about plants. So I felt as though I was leaving a family, both human and plant-like. And but we have been comfortable with our decision, and our way of recovering from that change was to start a farm, which was for better or worse. Starting the farm has been a lot of work, but it's been a way for us to stay grounded and make more of a community that we missed on the West Coast.
And has it always been Barefoot Botanicals, the 18-acre?
So we started out with the name Barefoot Gardens because we had the idea of having we started out with more of a biodynamic philosophy, and we were really trying to apply those principles. We were growing vegetables and herbs and flowers. We started in way over our heads. And ultimately we realized that doing so many different things over time was going to really wear us out. It was definitely burning us out. And so over time, we transitioned to doing more herbs, but we were doing a lot of restaurant sales. So we were selling herbs to restaurants. And then we started selling herbs and edible flowers we were selling as well. We started selling herbs to manufacturers of herbal products, starting out with things like Tulsi basil and other herbs that we already were comfortable with growing. And so once we started doing some of these contracts, we realized that maybe we should really focus on the herbs. I had already started a business that was an offshoot of Barefoot Gardens called Barefoot Botanicals back in 2012. And that was my educational division. So I started teaching classes before we switched over completely to herbs at the farm because we were always growing them. So I was teaching herb classes under my Barefoot Botanicals name. And then once we decided to make the farm completely herbal, basically my LLC absorbed the Barefoot Gardens sole proprietorship. So legally, my business bought the Barefoot Gardens business.
Can we go back to like the early years of the farm? Because I follow you on Instagram, and you had a series of posts when you talked about like putting in grass. I saw pictures of you with machinery, getting the soil ready. Can you just take us back as to what was that experience like? And I'm sure it took several years to convert it from the vegetable farm to an organic farm.
Yeah, so we started out on a site that was previously farmed as a sod farm. So sod is an essentially extractive type of farming, which much of farming is extractive. But this is extremely extractive in that they literally harvest both the plants and the soil with each harvest. So you plant grass, you harvest, a quarter to a half inch of the soil with each harvest of the sod, and they roll it up. So literally the soil was going away with every year's harvest from this site. And so we were left with very little organic matter. The owners of the land, we don't own our farm, so we lease it from owners that had a vision of a place that was much healthier, and they didn't want to be drinking from water that was coming from a well underneath a site that was becoming completely eroded, both physically and also chemically. They were sprayed. You have to spray a lot of sprays to keep non-grassy species in your sod. So 97% weed free is what sod is technically. And so they have to use a lot of chemicals. So when we came here, we really were starting with a depleted site. I felt in my heart that I wanted to make up for any additional extraction that we were going to be doing by farming with wrapping all of our tilled areas, because at the time we were doing a lot of tilling because we were growing things like lettuce and tomatoes and things that just required a lot of preparation ahead of time. And greens, lettuce and greens require a lot of soil movement. So I decided that I would start planting native trees around our farmed fields. And I reached out to the NRCS, or the Soils and Conservation District, locally, our county Soils and Conservation District. And I told them about my site And she said, well, what do you think of doing? And I said, well, I'm thinking about planting trees around our farmed fields to kind of absorb excess water and build soil around the fields. And she said, well, I can maybe help you. And I'd reached out to her because I thought maybe they knew of a good place for me to buy cheap trees, basically, like where can I get cheap trees? And she said, well, we can actually provide funding for you to buy whatever trees you want. You can get bigger trees if you have additional funding. And I said, oh, well, then absolutely. So and at the time I was working full time as a nurse. So I had some money in my pocket. So every dollar that they gave me, I put in $3 to $4. So they contributed about 25% of the project, which made
Wow.
it which made me feel like I could spend more. So I hired my friend who is a landscape architect who focuses on native restoration projects. I hired him to do a plan for me. So he planned a 3-acre planting around my farm fields, including a warm season grass meadow that would take up 1 acre. I had never known much about the warm season grasses, but I did know they were beautiful and I knew that they provided a lot of habitat. The Resource and Conservation District connected me with the WIP program, which is the Wildlife Habitat Improvement Project through the Federal National Resource and Conservation Service. They're the ones who actually gave me the money, and they required that I plant warm season grasses in order to get the money for the trees and shrubs that I wanted to buy. So I did this 3-acre planting and I did it organically. They argued with me a bit about whether I should use Roundup, and I said, no, absolutely not. So I did it without Roundup, which is apparently a difficult thing to do. Although, it did take a lot of weed whacking. I first tilled and then I seeded, and then I tried to hand pull some weeds out. I did a lot of weed whacking around the trees and shrubs that I planted to make sure weedy species didn't come in. So it was a bit of management for the first couple of years, but once it started to take on its own life, I have not done much at all except cut a path so that we could walk through it. And it's really been an amazing addition to the farm. Within one season, we had sounds that we had never heard here before: frogs and red-winged blackbirds and so many dragonflies and so many pollinators, just so much more life on a site when you have water. So one of the things that I did when I implemented this project is I created depressions and berms, kind of like permaculture applications where you're trying to hold water on site. So I did a lot of it creating wetlands, basically. And those wetlands are what really brought an amazing amount of diversity to the site.
Wow, it's giving me chills. I need to schedule a trip over there and just to watch those grass.
Yeah, it's really nice. I love it. It's probably like my favorite thing about the farm.
So one of the things also on your website, you talk about between disease care versus healthcare, and you mentioned that you were a nurse. And so can you talk more about that, about our current healthcare system?
Yeah. So I studied herbalism before I studied nursing. So I came into our healthcare paradigm as an employee with a different framework in my brain about how health can be achieved. And what I found when I got into nursing school and later working in healthcare systems was that we don't promote health. We don't take the time to do that, in part because of the way the system is set up. We don't devote time to individuals to really provide education and support. We just give them pills to help suppress symptoms, which, in some situations, that is very much very appropriate. When you have an acute issue, sometimes you do need to take something that's going to get rid of that acute issue, or at least help you get through that day. Sometimes it's necessary. But we don't support people on a trajectory toward health. We just suppress disease. And so one of the things that I learned working in our healthcare system is most of the providers, the physicians, the nurse practitioners, the nurses, they know this. It's not like they don't know that they're doing almost a disservice to our world with some of the ways in which we approach disease. They feel powerless to change it because they're oppressed by the lack of time that they can spend with people. Their training doesn't incorporate the skills and tools that they would really need to know in order to really promote health. They're trained really well in disease suppression. They're trained really well in emergency mitigation of issues that come up. For example, hospitals basically are giant acute care centers. They're providing support for acute conditions. But chronic diseases, we completely get a big fat F in managing them, because what we basically do is we just manage exacerbations of chronic diseases over and over again with individual members of our society that end up in hospitals, nursing homes, and we have not figured out as a society how to change that situation. And I think in part because we have massive investments in infrastructure that keeps us unhealthy.
Well, it's true. My doctor, when I have high blood pressure, I'm taking medication for it. And basically, I met him for 15 minutes and he told me, well, all you have to do is like stop eating rice and lose weight. And that's it. That's all he told me. And then I had to go study, what herbs would be helpful, obviously change the diet and exercise. But it's the mind, body, and spirit, which I feel like there's a disconnect between traditional practices and the appreciation of how, and you also talk about it, how humans have evolved with the plants. Mm-hmm. Can you comment on that and talk more about what is that evolution between people and our relationship with plants?
So we are made of organic matter, our bodies. And I guess the best way I can think about this diversion that we have, and this is a little bit of a backtrack to what we were just talking about, when I compare agriculture, organic agriculture versus conventional agriculture, and more natural and traditional systems of health and conventional healthcare. So with organic agriculture, if you have a more holistic approach, which I think there's some farmers who maybe don't necessarily adhere to healthier systems, they kind of just maybe are organic in name only. Although I think if you're certified, it's hard to, the certification process does require that you demonstrate that you're really making an effort to improve the land you're on. But organic agriculture takes into context the holism of the system, the impacts on the individual plants by supporting the overall health of the whole environment, the energetic and physical health of the place. And the idea is that if you have a healthy system, it's going to support a healthy plant and a healthier human that's eating that plant, right? Whereas conventional agriculture is going to treat symptoms by measuring soil, seeing how many molecules of this or that are in the soil, how much electrolyte is, how much is calcium, phosphorus, all these different ingredients in the soil, and then injecting them with those ingredients. That's the same way we approach our bodies in our modern healthcare, right? So when you compare traditional systems with health systems, with more natural and more, in many cases, traditional systems of healthcare, you're thinking about the whole of the person and the system in which that person is found and how that system impacts that person, and not just what they put in their mouth and not just where they work necessarily, but everything, the house, the family dynamics, the environmental conditions, the spiritual conditions, the connection they have with other people, the their daily interactions, day-to-day life. What does it involve? And a traditional practitioner or an herbalist may approach someone and try to look at what happens over the course of your day. What does it look like or feel like when you wake up in the morning? And how is your connection with your partner if you have one? Are you Do you have friends? You know, is there someone that you get to, if something was going horribly wrong with you, do you have someone you can call? Like all these kinds of things that denote psychological and spiritual health are not even looked at in our current paradigm by a lot of practitioners. There are some who try to make time for that, but not all. And it is representative of, I think, our evolution as a species that is a part of its environment. We have evolved from organisms that were floating in the ocean and then eventually made their way to land and only survived on land because there were plants there. That's the only reason mammals and other species are able to survive beyond micromolecules and bacteria, viruses, and fungi on land, because we don't live on bacteria, we live on plants. We do have bacteria as part of us. We have fungus as part of us, but we depend on plants. So our cells need the diversity of molecules that plants provide to us. And when we cut ourselves off from that connection, we lose health.
And with all of this knowledge that you have, you mentioned that you have a school. And I was looking through the information. Can you talk a little bit about if somebody signs up, like what can they expect from the Herbal Foundation course? I mean, it shows that it's going to start in April.
Yes. Yeah, so I actually I'm full for 2022, but I'm adding another class. So I have a wait list and I'm going to be opening up another group. I'd be willing to open more groups if more people want to learn about plants. But basically what that course does is it introduces people or helps connect people who already know a bit about herbalism to hands-on interaction with plants and making plant medicine. So I do a twofold approach, actually kind of a fourfold approach. I do a body system lecture each month, which is done online. So this year, that's a different approach than I've had in prior seasons, but I've decided to reach all those students with one presentation. I'm going to be doing that portion online. And every month we focus on a different system and how herbs can be used to support that system. And then once they're on site, which is once a month for a full day, we do a field walk. We do a botanical nomenclature, which is like basically the language of botany, as well as botanical family education. So I spend an hour to an hour and a half each month. We go out into the field, we learn how to identify plants. So that is usually by plant family. So the first month we talk about the mints. It's one of the easiest families to identify. It's one of the families that many people know a lot about. So we go around and we meet lots of mint family plants. And we learn about the different characteristics. And I have students every single year come back the next month. So we do that in May or April. They come back in May. And every single time students come back and they say, I didn't know there were so many mints everywhere. I've been identifying mint everywhere I go. And it's, you know, a lot of herbs that they already know that they had no idea were mints in that family, that is. So I won't give away too much information, but a lot of plants that we all know and love that are aromatic are in that family. So so that's one of the things that I feel like is I love to see light bulbs go off. And so the other things that we do in the class, we do the field walk, the botanical education, and then we do a field harvest and medicine making. So I will take the students out. We do either a cultivated harvest or a wild harvest, and the wild would be on site. And we bring it back into the processing area. We hose it off or clean it off, whatever we need to do for preparation. And then we make some medicinal product each month. So we may make a bitters blend. We may make a syrup. We may make an oxymel. We might make a cream or lotion, which we do usually in July. We harvest calendula, then we dry it, then we make oil, a calendula oil, and then we make a cream or a lotion, which is a whole day process. So we really do teach here about how to be more self-sufficient as an herbalist with your hands in the dirt, in the soil, learning with the plants, which I think is the best way.
It is the best way. And then on top of the school, you also have a CSA. Can you help define and describe how that is?
Yeah, so the CSA, we're working on adjusting the model a little bit based on feedback from prior seasons. So in the last few years, we've done a set box of herbs each month, and we've delivered them to various vegetable CSAs. So members of vegetable CSAs would buy ours as an add-on. And I provide them with video instruction on how to make different products with each herb that they get in their box. And we do that from May through October. The feedback that I've gotten is people are overwhelmed by it. So we have decided to change the model, and we're just kind of having conversations about it this year, and doing a kind of like a buy-in early in the season, and then you tell me what herbs you want. And either I deliver them to you or ship them to you, or you can come to the farm and you get more of a discount if you harvest it yourself. So I tell everyone, okay, so this month we're going to have this, and this available. And the people who want to make the trip out can come and harvest as much as they want of the various different crops that we have. And then they're getting, if they're harvesting it themselves, they'll get basically up to a 50% discount, depending on what the crop is. And then the ones who are getting who have the CSA member, they get a smaller discount because we are harvesting it for them, but they're getting first dibs on crops that otherwise we don't make available to the public. So, and they still get access to the videos.
And maybe the Alchemist Kitchen can organize a trip, people from New York City and can come down to the farm. It's just like an hour and a half away.
Yeah, it's not far. It's not far. So it's definitely, if it's only once a month and not every month, that people will want to come. I know that there's some months that people have said that I'm always on vacation, in August. So I've done this CSA the last 2 years. This was one person's feedback. I've done the CSA the last 2 years, but I have to basically throw away my August box or give it away. And so this way they can just not buy anything that month.
So with the Alchemist Kitchen, we started out carrying your botanical syrups. I have one, rosemary, which is delicious. And the most popular is the rose geranium. Can you talk more about the botanical syrups?
Yeah, so we started making the botanical syrups in response to a need for more interesting drinks for the people that don't drink alcohol. So it was actually the whole reason that we built a commercial kitchen. I had always been making tinctures and teaching classes and seeing clients, and I was using my tinctures below the radar. I wasn't selling them at farmers market. We weren't selling any herbal products per se. We were mostly selling just fresh and dried herbs. And a friend of ours, we had given her a ton of our lemongrass because we had so much lemongrass. We're like, we can't fit it all in our dryer. Do you want some lemongrass? She took it home and she made this amazing simple syrup with it. And she brought it back for us to try. And we're like, oh my God, this is something. And she made it because we were having a party and we were wanting a non-alcoholic beverage. And so we told her, we're going to steal your idea, I think. We're going to start making simple syrups. And we had started experimenting with all these different crops. And one of our favorites was the one that you mentioned, the rose geranium. It is just divine. I mean, it's just amazing. The aromatics come through so well. And so we're playing with some crops that are not necessarily used to make medicinal products per se, but that are so intensely enjoyable and life-giving, in my opinion, and life-affirming, because why else would you want to live if you cannot enjoy things in life? And these provide these little enjoyable luxuries that I think are so just so fun. And it connects people with plants. So our mission is connect people with plants. And I feel as though the simple syrups help connect people that otherwise wouldn't be open to herbalism, and helps kind of bring them into the fold of how amazing plants can be.
And the way that I explain it to our audience, it's like you can taste the terroir of the farm.
Yeah.
Because it's harvest specific, you know?
Yeah. So we grow most everything we put in those syrups, we grow. So we harvest. So the rose geranium is a great example. We can't harvest the rose geranium, stick it in the fridge, and then deal with it the next day. We harvest the rose geranium and we put it in the syrup tank, because you're losing aromatics every second that it's not in that tank. So we literally for those really potent aromatic crops, it literally just goes a couple 100 feet and goes into that syrup. So it's really great that we're able to grow everything ourselves. Yeah.
And we've had celebrities. That's the very first thing I tell them to try. I can't drop names. Maybe I can, no. But really, I mean, celebrities, they're exposed to a lot of like amazing products, but when they taste it, they go, oh my God, this is amazing. So thank you so much for making amazing products. So what's the future for Barefoot Botanicals?
So for the future, we are increasingly focused on beverage craft. So we, as you said, the simple syrups, people love them. And we have realized that it is a really great way to reach our mission, to connect people with plants. And so we have invested more and more into educating people about how to use the syrups. We actually are working with videographers now to help create video. We've been doing cocktail kits or bar kits, we're calling them, to connect people with the products and then have education associated with how to make them into really great cocktails and mocktails. And we're also establishing a YouTube channel. We have one, but we haven't really been utilizing it. So we're building our YouTube channel with a lot more inspiration for people to use the syrups with, because I think people really do need some hand holding with it. The easiest, simplest way I use them is just in seltzer water. But yeah, the simple syrups, bitters, we're building a bitters line. I've always made bitters and I've always made tinctures. So we're kind of taking a lot of what I've always made and bringing them together in unique combinations for both individuals in the community, but also bars and restaurants that want to have a signature bitters blend. We will create something for them and private label it. So that's something that we're doing with some in the industry. And then I am just continuing to
build with the Alchemist Kitchen.
Yeah. And I'm continuing with the education. I love the education. I love to teach. And so I'd really, if Eric could just handle all the making of product and communicating with all the people that buy it, I just want to be teaching and hanging out with all the plants. So that's where my heart is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for being on our platform. And we look forward to, in the future, trying out more of your amazing products.